The book of Genesis, and we're in chapter 7 now. Genesis chapter 7. When you get there, let's go ahead and stand. I'll read some of this chapter to you. Genesis chapter 7. Stand, I'll begin reading in verse 1. And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by sevens, the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according unto all that the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him, into the ark, because of the waters of the flood. Of clean beasts, and of beasts that are not clean, and of fowls, and of everything that creepeth upon the earth, there went in two and two unto Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same year, were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And the selfsame day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them into the ark. They and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. And they went in unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And they that went in male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him. And the Lord shut him in, and the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was left up above the earth. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters, and the ark prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubit upward did the water prevail, and the mountains were covered, and all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle and of beast and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land, died. And every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle and the creeping things, and the fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth. And Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. All right, we'll just stop there. Obviously, it keeps going on to chapter 8, which, Lord willing, we'll pick up next week. But you can be seated, and I've already prayed for the reading of the word, and I just want to jump into this, and I'll start by just telling you the title of the message is The Worst Year Ever. The worst year ever. Now, some would say that about 2020. COVID hit, and it was a bad year. 2021, 2022, like a lot of people would say, man, those are the worst years, of our life, thinking about their own personal life. But really, in the scheme of things, there's been a lot worse years for us to go through, just as a nation, let alone in the world. And so that's not it. The worst year ever. Some have said the year 536. I don't know exactly what all when I didn't look real deep at it, but I guess there was a volcano eruption, and there was just a lot of death, and all in 536. Some say that goes on record as the worst year in history. Okay, but I would go so far as to say, no, probably the worst year ever was the year we just read about, where Noah and his family was on the ark, and a little could be said in the world of I can't imagine any time that you could think that could be worse than that time where everybody on the earth died except for those who were in the ark. And then just the experience for over a year being in the ark. And some, I would say, I had some people say this whenever I brought this up on social media. I had a couple people say, my wife included, said, wait a minute, but the worst year was when the fall of man, when Adam and Eve sinned, put a curse upon the whole earth. All right, I'll give you that, but I'm talking about post-fall, and that was one day. I'm talking about an entire year. What was the worst year that ever happened? I would say the Noah and the ark and this flood situation. All right, so let me give you a little bit of an explanation of the time frame. I haven't figured it all out number-wise, but all the scholars, people that have added all this up, say that they were on the ark a total of 370 some years. There's a couple different variations. 370. What we do know just by reading this, there was 100 to 120 years of building the ark to begin with. That's a long building project, okay? So, of course, they lived to be over 900 years old. Noah did. And so we understand that, that living to be 120, that span of their life was just a small portion of their life, but still significant time. 120 years pretty much dedicated to building the ark. We understand Noah, being a preacher of righteousness, was preaching during this time. I've talked about that in the past lessons. And so we know this was a long building program, if you would. All right, but from the time they were on the ark, here's what we know. Also, 7 days loading the ark. So they had to, after they built it, they had to have all the food and preparations that were going to go into that. And then loading up the ark. Now, it seems in our text to indicate that all the animals came to Noah and his family. And I've had some ideas in my head. Number one, maybe the animals weren't very aggressive at that point, weren't running away from mankind, but maybe actually, relied on mankind. And so, and it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, because God could have just sent them all marching 2 by 2 into the ark, just as a supernatural thing. But it does seem like it's very possible that the animals at that time weren't as aggressive. They may have already even been somewhat tamed, and because the Bible said to have dominion over them and everything. They might have already been tamed to where all the animals were like part of this huge zoo kind of a situation. None of that matters. Like I said, all we know is that they did go onto the ark, and we read in the text that it was 7 of all the different 7 of the clean animals, which went in male and female. So that's like, of one, type of animal. I don't want to say species because I don't completely understand. We don't know exactly what all species were on the ark. But there were like 7 types of them, that went in 2 by 2. That's 14 groups of these. 14 total. And then 2 of every unclean animal. So they go in 2 and 2, so that's 4, so we have a whole lot more than you think. It's not just like 2 of every animal was just on the ark, like the children's puzzle sets show, or the coloring books or something like that. It wasn't quite like that. And if you think about it, it makes sense how many people, right, humans were on the ark in order to repopulate the earth, where you had Noah and his wife, Shem, Ham, Japheth, and then their wife. So you got 8 people, 8 human beings on the ark, male and female, right? So there's four groups, male and female. So it kind of makes sense that there's going to be more than just 2 animals. For one, some of the animals could die. As far as the clean animals go, some of them were sacrificed after they came off of the ark. So there's lots of reasons that there needed to be that amount of animals on the ark. And so God had this all figured out, told him what to do. The animals came to him. He put them in there. We know it took him 7 days, a whole week to load that up, which I imagine that was a long week, getting them all in there, putting them in where they needed to go, caging them up or whatever. And I don't know, I'm assuming, most people assume that they were in some kind of a sleep state in the ark. God probably put them in some kind of a condition. Maybe just the scenario itself would have put them all to sleep so that they weren't necessarily in great need during that time. Maybe woke up and enough time to eat and then just went back to sleep. I don't really know, but we know that God made it work out somehow. After that 7 days, we know that while they were on the ark, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, most people just stop there and they think like that's it. That was it. It rained 40 days, 40 nights, and then they got out of the ark. Or they think, a week later or something that dried. But actually, the Bible says that it was 150 days after that 40 days and 40 nights of the rain just coming down and just splitting things and causing says that I can't remember how it says, but the bottoms of the earth basically opened up and the waters came out, and so all of these things caused a huge just mess on the earth, if you will. And then it floated for 150 days waiting for all that water to dissipate. Okay, after they thought that it was dry, Noah sent out raven, comes back, and there's, we got to wait. So another 7 days, sends out a dove. And so we see that this time is just going on. So we know 40 days, 40 nights, and then 150 days floating there, 7 days, all of these added up. And then I'm missing something in there, I know, where it talks about them being on there for some time. And the scholars, the experts say that there was 370, I think I said years earlier, I meant days, 370 days, which is over a year. Okay, so I'm going to stick with the fact that for that being a year, a long time on the ark, a miserable time on the ark, a period in history. I mean, you talk about dark ages, you talk about misery, we're talking about the entire world. Now, the population nowadays is all over the whole earth. Obviously, we have billions of people. So, 2020, there was a lot of people that died during that year. Okay, you can debate as to whether COVID was the cause of any of the deaths and all that stuff. Whatever the case, I believe a lot of people died of COVID. We know people who died, and certainly there was, we lost loved ones either from that or some other thing. But man, 2020 it was a terrible year. But comparatively, percentage-wise, we're talking about the entire earth, except for who's on that ark, was destroyed. And not only that, the conditions. Can you imagine 1 year floating around on this wooden ark? Wood, by the way, absorbs smells and moisture and all that. They did put some kind of pitch, some kind of slime or whatever on it. But we understand this would have been a miserable time. There's one window in the top, which I'm assuming for 150 days of the water, waiting for the water to dissipate. You know what they're probably shoveling out of that window? What do you think the animals are doing after they eat? So they had to shovel all that out. And can you imagine living with that smell all that time? Just the stinky, smelly conditions. Dark because you only have that one little window on this huge ark, and not a whole lot of airflow. It's damp. Just think about the motion. I don't know, but I would assume there wasn't a whole lot of experience floating around on boats. I mean, they had oceans and lakes and stuff, but I don't know how adapted they were to the movements. But I can about guarantee you there's some seasickness and some motion sickness, because this wasn't just some rough seas. This was seas that was just tossing them all around about. Just the most, I can't even think, the most unfathomable things going on during that time. And then claustrophobia. I know it was a pretty big ark, but think about all the animals that were on there. They couldn't have had a huge living space for Noah and his family, and then just not being able to see, not being able to get outside and get the oxygen, not being able to, to move around that much. Oh, I can't imagine the claustrophobia. the hard work, trying to make sure everything was fed, everything's taken care of. Like I said, shoveling out the waste, once the rain was over, getting all that out of there. How about this? The cries of the people as they're dying when the rain begins and it starts getting up past a certain level, maybe banging at the door for who knows how long, it was before that water got up over their heads. Some of them maybe even trying to hold on after that for some time. You just can't imagine that feeling. And then knowing that the entire world died. And now it's just you and your family and these animals on the ark. Imagine the loneliness. Imagine the feelings that they would have there. So I want to just talk a little bit about that. And I want to use that to make this application, okay, that we as Christians, now the ark, I said before, it pictures salvation. It's a great picture of salvation because while God destroyed the earth with the flood, he also spared them, took them in the ark, saved them, put them above the tribulation, if you will. And then, they come out and repopulate the earth and start the new world, so to speak. All right. However, in this sermon, as opposed to thinking of the ark as heaven, because, when we're escaped from the tribulation, from the wrath of this that's yet to come on this world, we're up in heaven enjoying it, we're at the wedding feast. That wasn't the case with Noah and his family on the ark. And so I want to use another picture and just say this, that, hey, as Christians, just like Noah and his family, we're going to call them a Christian, representing Christian family, we're going to go through stuff on this earth. And you can't say like, well, I don't think we're going to go through any hard times. When you look throughout history, and when you look at the pictures in the Bible, and you look at the heroes, you look at Noah here, who is seen as a righteous man in God's eyes. So this year of the time that they're on this flood, number one, I would say it was the worst year in history for suffering. Again, spiritually, there was a time when man walked with God. Now we're in a sin-cursed earth. But after the fall, as far as all human history from that time forward in this corrupted earth, this was the worst year in terms of people suffering. Okay, look at verse 1 again. Genesis 7, it says, "And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation." Can you imagine Noah and his family for 1 year in these conditions thinking, so this is what we get for being a righteous family? We get all this misery, we get this suffering for an entire year. But wait a minute, remember this, that God could have destroyed Noah and his family as well. He didn't have to show the mercy. He didn't have to spare them because guess what? They're sinners too. We understand that from the Bible. All men have sinned, and it's death passed upon all men because all have sinned. Noah and his family was not, an exception to that. So we understand that he was sinful. God could have took him out. God could have wiped him out with the rest of the world, but God spared him. He had a plan and a purpose, and he said, I find you righteous. Obviously, he wasn't perfect, but God found him righteous. He found him a man of faith, and by faith, he obeyed God, and he moved. He made this ark, and he obeyed what God told him to do. But you might wonder, why do Christians suffer? Why do we have to suffer? Yeah, of course, we could just die and go to hell, but thankfully, the Lord gave us the gift of salvation, but yet we still find ourselves suffering. And why is that? Well, keep this in memory. Look at Romans chapter 8, famous verse we go to a lot. Romans 8, verse 18. The Apostle Paul, who had experienced a lot of suffering in his lifetime as well, he puts it so wonderfully here, Romans 8, verse 18. He says, "For I reckon that the suffering of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us." Look, we're going to go through rough times, even as Christians. Why do bad things happen to good people? Well, first of all, there are none good. No, not one. But secondly, those who are even seen righteous in God's eyes and that we might call good in a way, we are still going to go through these things, but we have to reckon that That's this time on earth that we might spend suffering is nothing compared to that glory that we're going to spend in eternity, which we don't deserve, but we've been given. And so we're going to enjoy that. So while we're on this earth, a short time, we can endure suffering. 1 year was a long time for them to suffer the way that they did, but you know what? They got out of that. They did repopulate the earth. They did, some of them at least, maybe not all of them, did go to heaven, and we will be there for eternity. Lord willing, we'll get to meet them one day. Shake Brother Noah's hand. Okay? So this was some serious suffering going on, though. And, the animals, there was obviously suffering. There's a lot of death. These animals you talk about like PETA. Imagine what PETA would have, what they would have said about Noah putting all these animals on that ark that way. This was a time of suffering for everything on the earth. The amount of just work putting into that, trying to get things going. Noah, yes, he lived to be 900 years, but he's 600 years old at this time. I don't care how you cut it. That's old, 600 years old, and he's on the ark, and he's in misery because it's just how it is. That's just human nature. There was the misery, of course, of just the rain and the boat. Verse 11 talks about let's see here. Verse 11 says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, in the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were open, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Now, it's not like there was just nice, gentle rain that came down for 40 days and 40 nights. We're talking about all of the water in the earth and above the earth just pouring out and just crushing the earth for 40 days. And so this was a terrible thing to happen. And then one of the, some of you ladies especially, you'll agree with me, one of the worst things about this, if you read about all the animals he took into the ark, he took creeping things. Creeping things in the earth. Now, he didn't take the things that had that didn't have nostrils. Okay, the Bible talks about that. So don't worry. I don't think mosquitoes needed to be on the ark. I think they survived just fine. I don't think he took. He obviously didn't take the fish and all that stuff. You've seen some pictures where there's like a little on the ark. There's like a little goldfish bowl. With 2 goldfish in it. The fish were just fine out there in the water. Now I'm sure a lot died. There's no doubt about that. But they survived out there. But there were creeping things. There were, all the things that you don't like, they were on there. And the whatever was alive at that time. And so we're talking about a lot of suffering. But it reminds us that, suffering is going to come. And Noah experienced the worst year for suffering. Guess what? There is a time, and at the end of the message, we'll read it once again. I know it's not the first time I've done it. There is coming a time in the end where there's going to be the great day of suffering, a great, 3.5 years of suffering, but there's going to be another great time. And between the Noah's flood and the earth being wiped out, by fire and all this in the end times, between that time, there's going to be a lot of suffering. Even among God's people, there's going to be tribulation, trial, testing, all these kinds of things. And we need to just endure, and we need to remind ourselves the suffering in this earth is nothing to be compared to the glory that's in heaven. All right, but not only the suffering, it was the worst year for death. Again, percentage-wise, the entire earth, other than the family on the ark, died. And so there's nothing in history to compare to how many percentage of the world died. But it's coming again. Like I said, the day is coming where the earth is going to be destroyed by fire in a similar fashion, and very few are going to remain at that time. Now, when it comes to suffering and it comes to death, Job is a good example of a righteous man who endured suffering and endured the loss of his family, the death of his loved ones. He had to endure that. He needed to get through that. And look, I haven't had to experience that much. I've had grandparents pass away. I've had, people that I love pass away, but I haven't experienced my immediate family, not my mom, dad, sister, not my wife, not my kids. I haven't had to experience that. But guess what? There are people in this room and there are people in our church who have suffered that. Some suffered that in 2020, 2021. Some suffered that in bad times throughout history. And no doubt for them, that might be the worst time ever. But the bottom line is we can compare that. We can look through other times in the world and we can say like, hey, this is nothing new under the sun. As bad as that is, as hard as it is to go through, it's not the worst day. It's not the worst year we've ever had. And there's going to be a day coming that's even worse than any of that. And so we need to put it into perspective and say, like, I'm following the Lord. I'm serving him. I'm going to keep my head up. I'm going to remember that the suffering in this world is nothing to be compared to the glories of heaven. And I'm going to keep on pushing on. But not only was it the worst year for suffering, the worst year for death, but then it was the worst year of the destruction of the world. I'm talking about the earth, like the mountains and the trees and all that stuff just was totally ripped up, tore up. I don't know there were some mountains and everything before the flood, but I don't know what degree the mountains were like higher after the flood, if that makes sense. In fact, the Bible talks about how high the water was above the earth, and whatever, I can't even remember what it was, 15 something. But anyway, it talks about how high it was, and I don't even think that would come close to covering up the tallest mountains that we have on the earth today. But I think that makes sense in light of, hey, the fountains of the deep busting open, the earth basically is just twisting at its core. There's no doubt the plates in the earth are coming together, and some of the mountains are jetting up. This was a result of all that was going on during this flood. The earth was just being destroyed. The whole earth, all the green, everything destroyed by flood. Now, thankfully, that God designed where seeds and all that can survive. And after everything dried up and the sun came out and things began to grow again, it'll do that after major floods. God made things to survive, but everything was destroyed for a time. When they got off the ark, there's nothing. It's just all just destroyed I couldn't imagine the feeling of what that might have looked like when they look out and just see this war zone, this destruction through the entire earth. Could you imagine? I mean, I don't want to be too morbid or grotesque here, but can you imagine the smell? All these bodies that have just rotted all over the world, and not just people, but animals and decaying. I'm not talking about just decaying flesh of the humans, which is bad, and which is probably worse actually, but all the rotten, even vegetation and all that would have been there. The smell would have been awful. The destruction of the world would have just been a hard thing to even look at and to fathom. Look at verse 11 again. No, I already read that. Okay, look at 2 Peter. We'll just start wrapping up. I know it's a short message, but 2 Peter chapter 2. Nobody ever complains when you say it's a short message. 2 Peter chapter 2. All right, just a reminder. Not the first time, and it's not the last time, but we'll look at this. And when we talk about suffering, we talk about things that are coming. The worst year in our history so far was Noah, the time of Noah and the ark. But then there's coming a similar time. The Bible makes it clear. Look at 2 Peter chapter 2. And in verse 5, it says, He spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. And then it goes down another point in history where a region was destroyed, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with the overthrow, making them an ensample unto those that after should live ungodly. And delivered just Lot, vexed with his filthy conversation of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them in seeing and hearing vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. The Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptation, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. And so, we see that this destruction is coming, this time where the Bible tells us that all the elements of the world are going to be burned up, and this time is coming. God knows, in the same way that there was an old world that Noah lived in, and he destroyed that, and then they started a new world, so too Christians are going to be spared from this earth when the final judgment comes. Earth is destroyed by fire and the plagues and all that. And then we come back to a new earth, new heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem, all these things the Bible talks about. And we come and take part in a new world that will come in the millennial kingdom. All right, so just keep it in mind. The bottom line is, the message is, yes, there is going to be suffering. Bad things have happened all throughout history, and they will continue to happen until the very end. Why do we go through it? Well, we deserve it. For one, we've sinned against a holy God, and he has the right to punish us however he wants. And he will punish the world one day in eternal damnation. We are fortunate. We are blessed and very happy that he has found mercy on us and he has saved us so that we could live forever in heaven. We just got to get through this time on this earth, just making the most out of it, preaching the gospel, getting people saved, getting that message out of here, preparing our hearts, preparing our loved ones for things to come, and just keeping in the back of our mind that one day it will be worth it all. Okay, let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word and for this message. Thank you for the day. I pray that you will just help us to serve you the best of our ability in the time we've got left here on this earth. And I pray that you be glorified, Lord, in our efforts to do that. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.